What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Alpha and Omega Exponent, also known as AOE, where we share content to add value to your life. My name is Parfait, and if you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe, you like the video, and you share it with someone to add value to their life. I am back with another episode story time, but before we go forward, make sure you go back and you watch the previous videos in order to catch up with the story time of today. Without further ado, let's get started. So, the story time of today is the story of how God can change someone's name. So, in the previous stories, we've basically been hearing about Father Abram and his wife Sarai. So now today, something interesting happened where God came to Abram and told him again, okay, I have something else for you. And he said that, yes, I promise you I'm going to give you a son through your wife Sarai, but I also want to make you the father of the multitude of nations. And how God was going to do that, God basically wanted to establish a covenant or a contract with Abram. And the contract, that the covenant that God brought to Abram, was that Abram was gonna have to circumcise all the men in his house, including himself. And this was the covenant in order for God to make Abram the father of multitude of nations through the son that he was going to give to her from his wife Sarai. And Abram, being obedient as he was to God, he decided to go forward with this contract and covenant, and he circumcised all the men in his house, including himself. And this was basically, the beginning of what we know today as circumcision. It started as a covenant between Abram and God, and it's passed down to generations to come and until today in the modern age that we live in. And after this took place, Abram was also very old when he circumcised himself. He was 99 years old when he was circumcised. So this goes to show how obedient Abram was to God. And after this took place, God decided to change Abram's name. He said, so now you will become the father of multitude of nations. Now your name is not going to be Abram anymore. Your name is going to be Abraham. And God also changed the name of his wife Sarai. God said, now she will become the mother of nations. Her name now shall become Sarah. So this took place, and going forward, God came back to Abram again, but in this time he decided to show up differently. So there were 3 men that were going by Abram's place, and Abram saw those 3 men, and these men were basically angels from God. And Abram ran to those men. He decided to invite those men in his house so that they can, take a break and they can basically eat bread with him. And he invited those men in his house. Those men decided to come. They accepted his invitation. They came. Abraham decided to serve them. He gave them water so they can wash their feet. And he gave them bread and food, and they ate together. And after they ate together, those men told Abram, they said, where's your wife, Sarah? And they were looking for Abram's wife. And, Abram, she told them where she was. But then they told her that, those men told Abram that, this time next year, when they come back, Abram is going to have a son from his wife, Sarah. So Abram was in the tent when these conversations were happening. And so when she heard that what those men told Abraham, she laughed. She was giggling and laughing because she didn't believe it. And when those men questioned Sarah about, why was she laughing, she basically denied it. And this goes to show that, Sarah was basically someone who was very bitter in her heart. She basically was very doubtful and was not really obedient and accepting to the commands and the promises of God. And so, based on these stories today, there's some big lessons that we can take away. And the first lesson is that when God blesses us, He also changes our name. If you were broke and God blesses you with a job, and now you're able to make some money, you're gonna go from being called a broke ass to now being called someone, someone who's valuable. You go from Mr. Broke ass to Mr. Valuable. If you were childless and now God give you a child, before they called you, this person, and now you become a mother and you become a father. If you are sick and God heals you, you go from being called a sick person to being called a healed person. And so this is really how God changes our name when He blesses us. He gives us a new name. And the second lesson that we can take away here, based on this story, is that God can also speak to us in different ways, and we have to be able to see how God speaks to us in different ways so we can be aware to be able to communicate with Him when He's speaking with us. And the other lessons that we can take away is that we have to serve others so that God can continue to bless us. If you expect to be served during the time that you need to serve, you're going to be disappointed. To serve is better and more valuable than to be served. And so the lesson for us is really the lesson of service. We have to be able to serve others so that God can continuously bless us. And the last but not the least lesson to take away in this story is that we have to find a way to remove bitterness in us. As Sarah, as we hear in the story, Sarah was a woman who was bitter, and a person who's bitter will have a hard time accepting words of blessing. Bitterness will always nurture things like denial. It's going to nurture things like hatred. It's going to basically make us someone who also going to make you grow in jealousy. And so we have to find a way to remove bitterness in us. And how do we do that? We have to practice gratitude. We have to be people of service so that we can grow in happiness. And nothing is too hard for God to do. So this is the story time of today. I hope that it added value to your life. I'll see you in the next story time episode.